other perspective, people. Welcome to another video out here. Today we will be reacting to Captain Midnight. He is one of my favorite channels on YouTube, especially when it comes to like superhero movies and everything. I feel like we share the same opinions on a lot of things, and I feel like Captain Midnight, the quality of the content he puts out is just wonderful with all the detailed research and everything he does. Um, so today's topic is Shazam: Fury of the Gods, or superhero movies in big trouble. Let's go ahead and watch this, and then I'll go ahead and give my personal opinions at the very end.
This video is brought to you by Skillshare. You know, I enjoyed that first Shazam movie. As far as kid-friendly superhero movies go, I thought it was really charming, funny, and at times, even pretty emotionally affecting. I've also enjoyed the previous work of director David Sandberg, going all the way back to a late night in 2015 when I was browsing YouTube and came across his inventive horror short, Attic Panic. That was back when he posted short films on his YouTube channel, Pony Smasher. And though the trailers didn't do much for me, I did hope that this movie would be better than expected, or at least on par with the first. And while I don't think it's a disaster or anything like that, there was just nothing all that compelling here.
It's flat.
I'll get into the specifics in a bit, but I should say up front that I don't just want to review the movie here, I also want to talk a little about the response to it, or really, the lack of one. Is the pretty notable box office failure of the film just a reflection on Shazam 2 and its marketing? Or can it tell us something about the state of superhero movies right now? Oh, and just to get this out of the way, this will feature spoilers for Shazam: Fury of the Gods.
When Billy speaks the wizard's name,
Shazam! Shazam!
So, I guess I'll just start with the elephant in the room. The ever-elusive superhero fatigue. And I know there's a lot of people who are probably immediately groaning at even hearing those words. I get it. Just the concept that people are sick of superhero movies and Marvel and DC are on the verge of crashing is really nothing new. It's a take that tends to pop up whenever a superhero movie underperforms. Like, I remember reading articles predicting it would happen all the way back in 2006, before the MCU even started. And a lot of those articles looked pretty dumb just a year or two later. So I've always been kind of cautious about making a video where I just throw down the gauntlet and declare that superheroes are dead at the movies. I think a big part of the problem was a lot of those old articles were written by newspaper critics who kind of all just lumped all the characters together. Spider-Man, Iron Man, Hulk, Steel. It was all just one big samey stew to them. But I think to really get to the heart of where superhero movies are at, or where they're going, you can't really apply that kind of one-size-fits-all narrative. Black Adam underperformed, so did Ant-Man 3, and now Shazam. All three of these movies have a couple things in common. They weren't very good, and they starred B or C-list characters. Now, if one of these movies was incredible, could it have grossed $1 billion? Possibly, sure, but I think when taken as a whole, the past couple years paint a picture of the lesser-known characters maybe no longer being able to get by on just being the new MCU or DC movie anymore. Basically, I don't think anyone should be lumping together Spider-Man and Batman with Shazam or even Ant-Man, because I think it's pretty safe to say that people will still probably show up for those beloved A-list characters, even if a lot of the others who have been given their own franchises are starting to struggle. Thor 4 and Wakanda Forever underperformed compared to their predecessors, but they still had fairly strong returns. And then there's No Way Home, which wasn't that long ago and obviously cleaned up. I think these upcoming months, with the Captain Marvel sequel Marvels and Guardians Volume 3, will be a real test of how invested people are in the MCU outside of Spider-Man, or characters that are no longer in it, like Tony Stark and Steve Rogers. I mean, people seem to forget this, but Captain Marvel cleared $1 billion back in 2019, which is pretty impressive considering how little known Carol Danvers was to the general public. And Guardians is maybe the MCU's greatest achievement in terms of elevating a very obscure comics property to the mainstream with huge success right out of the gate. But the sheer amount of superhero glut these past few years, thanks to Disney Plus and movies like Morbius and honestly Shazam 2, have really diminished that excitement. For DC, that test will kind of be The Flash, but I feel like that movie has so much baggage surrounding it that I'm not sure it can tell you that much about the appetite for DC movies as a whole. But I don't want to spend this whole video speculating about box office. I find it interesting, but the actual quality of the movies is what matters most, and on that front, things aren't great. Shazam! Fury of the Gods doubles down on a lot of the more generic elements of the first film while leaning back from a lot of what worked. For one thing, Zachary Levi dominates this movie from almost beginning to end. Asher Angel, the actor who plays Child Billy, and the performance that really anchored that first film, is barely in it. Honestly, I think if you just cut one scene, you could make the case that it's basically a glorified cameo. And while that might not seem like a big deal because Levi's face is the one on the poster, I do think it's a major problem. Mostly because Angel's Billy just feels like a much more fully realized character, while Levi is, by and large, playing a broad cartoon of a superhero. Now, this was the case in the first movie too. Very little of what Levi does in that film reminds me of Angel's performance. Honestly, the kid was actually called upon to do most of the heavy lifting, acting-wise. Like the scene that sees Billy talking to his birth mother, only to find that she wants nothing to do with him. But how big and over-the-top Levi went, I think still worked pretty well there, because he was playing a kid who just discovered he had superpowers. In that context, I think the performance worked pretty well. But in Fury of the Gods, almost all that dramatic weight is on his shoulders. And even though this movie is not exactly a solemn drama by any means, I don't think that performance is really up to the task. Levi constantly comes off as far more immature than Kid Billy. It feels like he has exactly two gears here. Broadly comedic enough to be in a Nick sitcom, and incredibly earnest. He can land the comedic stuff just fine. Like, there is some fun gags in this movie. But in his Shazam form, I just don't think Levi manages to establish that emotional connection to the audience that Angel did in the previous film. Now, one positive thing I'll say is that I think the director's horror roots really come through nicely here. There were a lot of fun monster designs in that third act. And while I've heard that many parents were upset about the scene that saw Veep's Diedrich Bader take a mind-controlled nosedive off a building, I actually thought it was one of the more effective scenes in the whole film. Not because it was dark and gritty, but because I thought Jack Dylan Grazer was just really good there. I think that scene feels so jarring to people because of how he plays it. Like, it's a little off tonally from the rest of the film, but it was also one of the few moments where it felt like this thing had some actual stakes. Grazer is another case where it just seems like he was way more locked in than the actor playing his adult counterpart. And look, I love Adam Brody. The OC, Kid Detective, I'm a fan, but he was really sleepwalking through this adult Freddy role in a way that Grazer just isn't. Honestly, I know they're both carryovers from the last movie. It felt really obvious to me that both adult Billy and Freddy were pretty miscast. But even Grazer's subplot is kind of undone by just how poorly written his new love interest slash villain is. Played by West Side Story's Rachel Zegler, the pair have some charming teen movie chemistry. But once the villain reveal happens, Zegler is saddled with a lot of bad faux Shakespearean dialogue. Helen Mirren, playing another one of the villainous sisters, can handle that kind of thing well and still manage to have a real sense of gravitas, but I thought the other actors really struggled with it. Then there's the actual look of the movie. It's all competently shot, but sitting there watching the John Wick 4 trailer before it started really put into stark contrast just how lifeless this film feels in comparison. And, you know, maybe it isn't fair to single out Shazam for this. I mean, I've liked MCU movies that have pretty bland visual styles too. But those early Shazam comics are so strange, colorful, and constantly visually inventive that it does kind of bother me how sterile the film feels. At the end of the day, though, it is hard for me to have too much ill will for this movie. Despite that one gruesome death scene, Shazam 2 feels pretty firmly aimed at middle school kids. If I had caught this on Disney Channel in like 2005, I probably would have loved it. It's the
Wrong
kind of
channel,
movie where
Captain
Lucy
Midnight.
Liu flies
Movie
around on a
HBO
wooden
Max.
dragon and shouts lines that could have been pulled straight from a Power Rangers villain. And I think there's definitely a place for that. It's kind of strange then that such a harmless, lightweight movie is having so much post-release drama. Both the director and star Zachary Levi seem to feel the film was kind of just dumped into theaters. There's also Levi talking about how there was a planned crossover with Black Adam that never happened,
Yeah, I
and
heard about
seeming
that.
pretty upset about it, which
The
to be
Rock.
honest was a little weird to me, because a crossover with the JSA feels like kind of a footnote compared to Shazam meeting Wonder Woman, which is still in the movie. In a scene that mostly plays like a goofy get-out-of-jail-free card so that none of Billy's choices in the third act actually meant anything. Okay, I'm just gonna be honest, I thought that Wonder Woman scene was pretty terrible. I'm sure Sandberg and Levi had
enjoyed
plenty of
it.
reasons to not be thrilled before the movie opened. With new bosses and all new plans for the
Wasn't
DC
good,
universe,
but I enjoyed it.
Shazam 2 had the unfortunate luck of feeling like yesterday's news months before it even came out. But I do think this movie shows that a new direction is definitely needed. When and if superhero fatigue does set in a major way, I don't think it'll be because people are just sick of seeing actors in superhero costumes. It'll be because the movies got too bland and uninspiring. Shazam 2 isn't the worst offender on that front, but I wouldn't exactly call it a part of the solution either. So, lately, I've been thinking a lot about getting more into short form vertical videos. You know, just making some stuff to post as shorts on here. The thing is, that's not a format I'm super familiar with. And that's where the Skillshare class,
Okay, well,
short form video,
so
create
that's the
viral
Skillshare
videos for
ad.
Instagram
So,
Reels and TikTok really came into
My
play
thoughts
for me.
on this
In
entire
it, travel
ordeal.
photographer
So,
Sean
first of all,
Dalton
in terms
really
of
breaks
Shazam
down
2,
where the big production differences are.
like Captain
something
Midnight
that
said,
I
it's a
found
bland movie. It's
extremely
not
helpful.
horrible.
That's really just the
It's-
tip of the iceberg.
It's
I love
still
video
enjoyable
production
in my
classes
opinion,
like
if you're,
that,
especially
and
if you're
Marquez
going with
Brownlee's
like
class,
kids or your
YouTube
family, like
success,
I did.
script, shoot, and edit. But if you're
I
into
went
more
with my
career-focused
nephews and my
classes,
sisters
they're
and
gonna
everything,
have
and
you
they all
covered there,
thoroughly
too.
enjoyed it.
Everyone has a different
Do
goal
I
in mind when they
think
join, and none of them
it's
are too
like the
small.
worst movie
Whether
out there?
you want
No.
to take a class
I
on
still think it's
improving
better
your
than Thor: Love and
productivity
Thunder.
or learning to
I
code
still
in
think
Python, Skillshare is
it's
gonna
more
have your back,
enjoyable
and the
than what
possibilities
Black
are
Adam was,
kind of
although
endless.
Black Adam
And
had
the
way
best part
better
is,
action and
my
everything.
viewers have a chance to browse the
Um,
Skillshare catalog completely free.
There's
for an
little things
entire
about
month.
it that I did
So
like.
just go to my link,
You know, the entire Wonder Woman sequence.
Captain Midnight 09
I
to 11
think
in the
the
description down
ending,
below,
like
and you can join
Captain
the class
Midnight
for
said,
free
it
right
negated
now.
all the consequences, but it was a nod to the comics and the animated movies, and so I enjoyed it for that reason. But it could have been better used. But the whole superhero movie genre in general, right? Like, I did like this movie better than Ant-Man and all that other crap that came out because Spider-Man Far Away From Home was probably like one of the best movies in the past decade or so. I personally loved it. That was a 10 out of 10 for me, right? But this movie and superhero movies in general now, I think they've gotten too comfortable to where they don't try to reach something new. Now it's about pushing agenda rather than pushing quality. But also on top of that, I think the other flaw that current superhero movies have is, there's so many coming out, whether shows or movies, and I don't think it's the superhero fatigue, but again, it's the quality of what we're getting. And that's why, I think it's a good thing to look forward to 2025 for DC. Marvel, we'll still have to see how everything rolls out. So far, the past two movies haven't been the best, but I'm hoping it gets fixed soon. Or past 2-3 movies, I forgot if Black Panther came out first or if Doctor Strange came out first. Yeah, so that one wasn't good. Thor: Love and Thunder wasn't really that good. The shows weren't really that good. Loki was good. But for DC, I think that's why it'll be a little bit more effective, and I think it's a good thing that in 2024 we have limited amount of things that are going to be coming out for DC, because obviously James Gunn 2025 is going to kick off the new DC universe, and so that actually has me more excited. And I honestly think, other than the Flash movie, I think, Blue Beetle is going to be a lone movie, and we'll see how that goes. We haven't heard good things about Aquaman 2. We'll see how that goes. But I think the rest of this year is just going to be more disappointing than not when it comes to superhero content. But the future is still bright. The future still has capabilities. People still love superheroes. Kids still love superheroes. I don't think superhero genre will ever die like people keep on predicting it to be. But we do need to get back to the point where quality does matter. And hopefully, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I think that will be probably the best movie of this year. Just based off of, like the trailers we've seen, the info we've heard and everything. And it's James Gunn goodbye. Same thing with Chris Pratt and everyone on there. And I think they're going to go out with a big bang. I have full trust in all of their capabilities. But what are your thoughts about this, on this entire superhero genre mess that's going on? Do you think it's the movies? Do you think it's the actors? Do you think it's the agenda? Do you think it's a quantity over quality? Do you think it's all of the above? Whatever your thoughts, leave it down in the comment section down below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that push notification bell for more uploads.